understand what some real game is, you're going to get it tonight. So please make sure you follow the Connect on all social media platforms, including LinkedIn, to make sure you find out what's going on next. Now, I have the illustrious pleasure to introduce our panelists for this evening. First up, this VCU grad, also GW grad, got her roots in the metro area, that's DC, all right? Beginning as a sideline roamer with Trinity, then she moved on in 2010 to be a part of the Monumental family, starting off working with U Sports and then becoming director of ops for our Washington Mystics. And now she is the assistant general manager. She has helped to set tradition, not only just any type of tradition, but a championship tradition. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure to introduce Miss Maria Jovinet.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Our next illustrious panelist has not only helped to bring in 2021 the proper way, but she set history, being one of 3 young ladies to be a part of Wild Card Saturday, being female coaches for the NFL. That's really, really big. And she also was a big part of the Washington football team's success this year. But before she got started with that, she was no slouch. She's a 7-time All-American as a quarterback and as a wideout. She's also a national champion in New York. She's been all over. She's helped with the running backs with Carolina. She's been part of the Greensboro scene, the New York scene. And like I said, she's part of the Washington football team. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Jennifer King.
Hey, what's up, guys? Glad to be here.
Now, this one right here, I'm a personal fan of. This 6'9", freakish athletic guy, brought terror to the A-10 as a Colonial, had a great illustrious career. He's also an Olympian, 9-time professional. He's been all over from Spain to Greece to Turkey, and the list goes on. He's played in the league, but now he's a guy who's finding himself as an executive for the Go-Go, and now he's part of the Knicks franchise. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pops Mensah Bonsu.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So ladies and gentlemen, as we get into it with our panelists, if you have questions, please make sure you check in with those and put them in the chat. We want to make sure we have a great time with our Q&A this evening, but we're going to go ahead and get into a couple of questions that I put together for our panelists to start off with.
Yep,
So,
and then real quick, TJ, sorry to cut you off. Karan Butler is on his way. He's just coming from practice, so as soon as he's ready to log in, he'll be joining the chat as well.
All right, we can't wait for Mr. Butler to join us. So as we scaffold to tonight, remember the topic is life after playing. Every athlete goes through, and it's a phrase called what's next, or life after, or it's time. How did you know personally when it's time? Was it a family decision? Was it a body decision? Did you know you wanted to change your roles? Did you know you were already ready to take that next step? What was it for you? Jennifer, let's start with you. What was it for what's next for you?
My big what's next moments was actually in basketball. You know, I grew up a basketball player and played in college, and I was actually playing in Australia, and I got to the point where I just didn't want to practice anymore. You know, I like games, and that was about it. I didn't have that drive anymore to practice. And you know, obviously as an athlete, if you get to that moment, you know, it's probably time to move on from it. So that was really my what next moment for me, when I just kind of lost that drive to go to practice and try to get better every day.
Wonderful, wonderful. Maria, as I stated, you transitioned from Trinity. What was that like for you when you moved on to the Monumental family? Did you look around first, or did you know that was the next step for you?
Yeah, well, I kind of think back to my playing days at VCU, Richmond, and let me just be very clear. I knew right away, like I was not going to be a pro athlete. Okay, so like the next step for me, like that just was not going to happen. I wasn't good enough to play in the pros. And so, you know, as I was reflecting on what I wanted to do with my life, you know, college is over in a flash, and I knew I wanted to continue to be around sport and help grow other, you know, young athletes. And so I wanted to make sport my career. So after college, you know, that's really what I looked to do.
Okay. Pops, how about you? You know, you had a great, you know, domestic and international career, and being an Olympian. I don't know, maybe it was year 7, 8 that you started thinking about it, or did you know what was it? What was life after for you? What's up next for you? When was that time?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I think, you know, when you listen to what Maria said, there was a self-awareness piece that came to it. For me, I was actually at the height of my career. I had played 8 or 9 years in my 10th season, and my career ended against my will. I thought I was going to go play. I'm 37 now. I thought I was going to play 4 or 5 more years and just end my career, on my own free will. And, obviously what God has planned for you isn't what you have planned for yourself. So when my career ended, I had to have that self-awareness and, be a realist and realize that my career had come to an end, regardless of how much I wanted to continue. And I had to think about the next step. And, once I figured out what it was I wanted to do, I accepted it. Although it was difficult, it's still difficult to this day. You can ask Maria, every other day I was in the gym working out, playing, or even practicing with the guys. And, so that void was
too.
I'm sorry. You know what? I got to speak to that. I practiced with the Washington Mystics, and I've played with all types of, professional athletes. That was the most difficult practice I've ever had in my life. Like I was struggling to walk. Like it was, I respected the WNBA obviously already, but then after that, I was like, yo, it is no joke. It's no joke once I practiced with the Mystics. But yeah, I just, I had to come to terms with it and, just realize that my career was going to go in another path, and I accepted it.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So to you three, you all have backgrounds of being athletes and playing on that level, and then most of you now in levels of executive work or sideline work or the caveat of both. So my next question, as we scaffold up to talk about life after playing, so most players get to this fork in the road and they have the side where it's like, okay, I was laying seeds along, like i.e. Brandon Marshall when he went from from playing to media, or you get to the end of the road and it's like, oh, well, I'm here now. So let me just walk through the door and find out what's next. What were some of the seeds that you were laying as you moved on? Was it some things that you learned and you watched different people to get to where you are? I'm gonna start with you, Maria, if you don't mind.
Yeah, to be honest with you, in college, I wasn't really planting the seeds for much of anything as far as a career goes, because I actually majored in criminal justice.
Okay.
And so, as college was coming to a close and I was reflecting upon what I wanted to do, as a career, I elected to go to GW here in DC to get my master's and really network, in the world of sports up here in DC. And so while I was in school, just took advantage of every opportunity I had to meet people in the industry, network, get my name out, learn as much as I could from my professors and other people in the industry, and just jumped at any opportunities that came along, whether it be volunteer opportunities, internships, whatever I could, as I went through my process to discover what I truly was passionate about, within the sports industry, and ultimately, landed a full-time job with the Mystics.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jennifer, how about yourself?
Yeah, in college, I was just in college enjoying life, and I was lucky enough to be chosen for a Nike coaching program at the Women's Final Four. Once I knew I wanted to coach at some point, but when I went to that event, I saw how important networking was in sports, and I can't stress enough to you guys how important it is to network with people. Obviously my hard work has got me where I am, but knowing the right people and doing a good job and people talking in rooms that you don't even know about is huge in sports. And it's so important to network with as many people as possible. And once I started doing that, things kind of took off for me. And then, I kind of grew into that mentality, as Maria talked about, just taking whatever was available to me, whether it was an unpaid internship or anything that you could do to get your foot in the door. Is so important. And, once I started saying yes to some things I didn't even want to do, it was amazing how doors started opening for me. And I started meeting people, in the right places. And, it kind of helped me get to where I am now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, it's your turn, Pops. Let me hear what you got.
Yeah, I think, speaking of foundation, I got to go back to my own foundation, which was my parents. My parents instilled, a foundation in me that, allowed me to treat people with a level of respect. So when I became a professional athlete, that's how I treated people, regardless of, who they were, position they had, and whether they were an owner or whether they were a janitor. And, I think that allowed me to go a long way. And when it came to me being retired, I remember somebody actually reflecting upon a time that they had interacted with me while I was playing, and they, and I didn't think much of it. It was just small talk to me. But then they referenced, hey, you gave us 2 minutes and you were respectful, you were nice. And, we appreciated that. Now, when it came full circle for me to need them or need, some help on this side of the game, they had no problem reciprocating. So I think that's how things worked out for me, was my ability to communicate and network with people while I was playing. And when my career ended suddenly and against my will, I was able to tap into that and utilize some of the things that I had laid in place to allow me to have these opportunities on this side of the game.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this dynamic, if you don't mind, guys. And Pops, I'm going to start with you. You all are athletes, like I said, and I mentioned, and you all mentioned as well. What are some things that you brought from your playing days into the life after portion? Because I mean, whether it's leadership, accountability, responsibility, those type of things that coaches still put in you and all that. What were some of the things that you brought from your playing days to your front office days, Pops?
That's an amazing question. And it's one question that I actually had for myself when I first got on this side. I knew, although I had an opportunity fall into my lap when I retired, I still didn't know I was ready for the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I had played a sport for 15 years, or just been an athlete for the last 15 years, 15, 20 years, I should say. And, my fiance at the time, she told me, if I just put the same amount of work ethic that I did in basketball into this life, she had seen me wake up at 5 a.m, drive an hour to work out, and do 2 or 3 different kind of workouts in a day, and sacrifice for my diet and everything else. And she said, if you can put that same type of work ethic and same type of effort into your career path on this side of the game, the results may be the same, if not better. And that's one of the things I carried over. And also on my first interview, I remember the interviewer asking me for my resume, and I was like, well, I don't really have one. And he was like, well, what have you done for the last 10 years? I said, I played basketball, because to us, playing a sport for a living isn't a job, because we get to do something that we love. And I just didn't feel like I had worked for the last decade. And he was like, no, you have professionalism, you have leadership qualities, just like you said. You know how to work in a team, you know how to be on time, you're accountable, and all these other things that I didn't know I possessed, that were transferable skills that could carry over to like I would say the real world. And I realized that, and that's when I put things together and understood that I had the abilities to thrive on this side of the game too.
Wonderful, Pops. Hey, Jennifer, what were your carryovers for you? What do you think?
I think the biggest things were just that work ethic and leadership. So many, I guess, attributes that make you a successful athlete, and successful on the field, on the court, will make you successful, after sports, whether it's in sports or not. Those things that, as athletes have that made us good, and that drive that we had to be great every day. As he talked about, if you keep that same drive, you're going to be good at whatever you do, as long as you have that passion to be good at it. And that's why it's so important to do something that you love, so you have that passion and that drive to be better. But yeah, those are the main things. Those same attributes that you have to be great carry over in life. So it's so important to use those experiences that you have as an athlete into the real world when you're done playing.
Wonderful, wonderful. How about you, Maria?
TJ, can I take this opportunity to get on my social media soapbox?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do your thing. Soapbox away. Matter of fact, you got the box ready?
I'm sitting, but really I'm standing.
All right, take it away. You got it.
Okay, listen. You have to be willing to do anything if you're going to work in sports. Okay. So even still, with my title as assistant GM, from time to time, I'll pop down and I'll fold towels with our equipment manager. I'll get out there and wipe the floor in the middle of practice. Okay, like in the world, the reason why I say social media soapbox is because everything always looks so fun and so perfect. And so like, look at me, like this is so glamorous. And that's not always the case. Like you have to be willing to do anything working in sports, and nothing can be below you. When you're in it together as a team, and that's really your family, like you're willing to do anything to, help keep your house in order, right? So that includes, sweeping the floor, serving other people food, And so for me, that's really a big part of when we interview people for internships, entry-level jobs, you know, what have you, like we paint the picture. And I respect the people that say, no, I'm not gonna fold towels, I'm not gonna wash laundry after the game. It's not for you, you know, it's not for everybody, but you have to be honest with yourself and make sure that, you know, no task is beneath you. And then the second thing quickly is to just always have a curiosity about yourself, like what you're doing, your role, your job, you know, the team that you're working for, the job that you have. Just always stay curious and stay learning. Keep educating yourself to always, you know, be better and learn more.
Could I piggyback off of what Maria just said? I think
Most
you know
definitely.
she made a great point there. You know, with where she started, it was the humility of things, and you know, I've seen it being, you know, a former NBA player and, you know, retiring and going right into the workforce. For me, it was, you know, I noticed a lot of players weren't willing to sacrifice or humble themselves to do some of the little things to get to where they wanted to. Because, you know, you worked your way up to becoming an NBA player. Then once you retire, you're going back into another field which you're a novice in. You know, yes, you may have a PhD in basketball, but you haven't experienced life on this side of the game, and you have to be willing to humble yourself, stay grounded, and do the little things. Like I scouted for 2 years with the Spurs, and you know, traveled around in difficult, you know, situations, and it was something that I wasn't used to, but I was willing to do it. And I was open enough to do it, and that's what allowed me to, you know, I personally felt like I took 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward, and that's what always happened. And I was able to benefit from that moving forward. So you know, Maria made a great point. It's the humility and how grounded you have to be to starting from the bottom and going back again.
Amazing, guys. Another question for you. You all have been a part of winning, just flat out. Jennifer, you were able to make history this past weekend, as I alluded to earlier, being one of 3. Pops, you're a Hall of Famer, you're MVP in several different leagues, champion as well. And Maria, you're a part of a championship organization. As much as you can disclose with me, when you first hit the ground in the professional setting and the curtain gets pulled back, what opened your eyes up a little bit? What made you think like, oh, this is kind of real in the professional scene? Because like myself and many people who are on the call this evening has these aspirations to be there. But what was eye-opening potentially on day one, and what's been you kind of prolific in these championship and successful cultures that you either been around of or helped to institute? Jennifer, let's start with you if you don't mind.
I think the biggest thing I saw when I got into professional sports was just that standard of operation, standard of everything. I remember my first day, I saw a receiver get cussed out because he was like a half a yard off of where he was supposed to be. Wow. But that's the difference in the NFL and winning and losing. It's so small. So the standard has to be super high in everything that you do, not just on the field, but off the field. You know, how are you preparing? How are you taking care of your body? How are you studying for the game? And you know, that's something that I've carried over, and something that I've learned from everywhere that I've been. It's about that standard, trying to have the highest standard for myself, and as well as everyone else. And that's something that Coach Rivera did a great job doing when he came here to Washington, was just changing the overall culture of our organization and increasing that standard and holding people accountable for things and being accountable for your own actions. So that's one of the biggest things that I saw, was just the standard of what it takes to really be great in professional sports.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Maria, when they pulled the veil back for you when you first started, what was eye-opening for you?
Yeah, I think you always have like an idea of what pro sports is really like, and like the different individuals that are involved and everything that goes into teams, and especially highly successful teams. You know, one thing I would suggest to some of the folks on the call that are looking to get into sports or just starting out in their career, you know, there's a lot of different avenues to break into sport that you might not have thought of before. You know, you don't have to have like the sport management degree. You know, there's HR, there's IT, there's law, all of these different fields. So I would just encourage you to find something that you're passionate about, and pursue that. And you don't have to have like the sport management title, as I said, to get into sports, because we are looking for more, specialized degrees. And then I think from like a player perspective, as Jennifer indicated, just the elite high level attention to detail. We're fortunate on the Mystics to have some of the best players, in the world on our team, Olympians, and seeing everything that they pour into our team, like both for them personally, but then just like the selflessness that they have about their business, mental health, nutrition, strength and conditioning. They truly, truly, truly pour a lot into everything. And then I'm personally proud. Also, quick shout out to Jackie Gemelos, who's on the call, Mystics player. Thanks for joining us. These women are incredibly powerful and have really used their voice for good. If you all aren't familiar with what the WNBA has been doing, especially our last season, the 2020 season, please Google it, tune in, educate yourself. These women are really making a difference in our world, and I'm super, super proud of all of the women in the WNBA, and especially our Mystics players.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, Pops, I'm gonna remix yours a little bit, bro, because as a player, you went from being evaluated to taking a front office role to being the evaluator, so to speak. So when that curtain got pulled for you back, how did that look from being the guy who's on the floor trying to get it done to the guy that got to put a culture in place off the court?
Man, if I'm honest, TJ, it was the most difficult thing I ever had to do. Like I said, my career ended earlier than expected, and I went from playing with these guys and being a competitor with them to working for a team that I would have to evaluate and look at guys who we could potentially sign. And I was in the process of being in the height of my career, so that ego and that competitiveness, kind of kicked in, and I realized, hey, what do I do? I'm over here, working for one of the best organizations in sport, but I still want to play the game. And now I have to evaluate it. And that's when, it kicked in with that again, referring back to that self-awareness kicked in. And I had to realize like, this just wasn't the way my path was supposed to go. And I had to accept it. And, as difficult as it was, over time, I came to terms with it, but learning, making that transition was difficult, but I also was aware that I had an opportunity to do things that not many former players get to do. I retired from playing, and as soon as I retired, I had an opportunity to scout with the San Antonio Spurs for 2 straight years. And, some of the gems and some of the things that we learned, similar to championship caliber teams like the Mystics, was attention to detail, and, never skipping steps. And that's one thing I learned straight from retiring from playing, was never skipping steps, because when you skip steps, your results reflect that. So, I can definitely attest to what, Maria was talking about, and Jennifer too. And, it really stuck with me, and it's allowed me to build on, what I've learned on this side of the game.
Wonderful, wonderful. Maria was alluding to it, and she's getting to one of my next questions. But in 2016, Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid decided to take a stance, and it's been affecting the world of sports ever since then. So no matter what side of the fence you stand on with the issues and things that they try to bring forth, there was a big uproar in front offices. There was a big uproar in professional sports, and people didn't know how to play it. But now we fast forward into 2020 and 2021 for the things that have ignited our country. Let's talk about for a second with the three of you all. How do you go into meeting rooms? How do you have your front office meetings in light of players and coaching colleagues, front office colleagues being a little bit upset or being concerned? How do you have that? How do you empower your athletes? How do you tell them to make the right call, make the right decision? How do you talk to them about protesting and being an advocate and using their voice and using their platform? Maria, you started that. So if you don't mind, go ahead and delve back in if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think, TJ, it's not something that happens overnight, right? Like this is something that you work for with your group. And when I say work for, I mean to build that trust with your team, with your family, to a point where, sorry, to a point where, 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 to a point where point where you feel comfortable really being honest with each other and having really difficult conversations. And this is years and years, and our GM and head coach, Mike Tebow, has done a phenomenal job of this. And so players feel comfortable talking in front of the group and speaking up. And it's just that level of trust that you have. And so when you come to the really, really difficult issues and decisions that you have to make as a group, that groundwork and that foundation has already been laid. And as I said before, I'm super proud of all of our Mystics players. I'm in the locker room with them, so I know like what is discussed, and I'm not in the locker room of any other team, so I can't speak for them. But I know everything that they do, they're very intentional about. They weigh the pros and the cons, and they go through, a mature process of thinking about all of these decisions, and none of it is taken lightly. And we really empower them to do that. I have to give credit to, our leader, our GM and head coach, Mike Tebow, for allowing the players to have the space to do that. And the forum to be able to speak their mind and stand up for what they believe in.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jennifer, how about yourself? Because let's be honest, you're in a male-dominated sport, and the stances took place in your sport. Like I said, Colin and Eric started there. So what has been the changes that you've seen stepping in? Because you've been in the Carolina organization and several others. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with Eric when I was with the Panthers, and I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal guy who could definitely be still playing in the NFL right now.
Right.
I think we've reached a point now, particularly this season, where it's been okay to like she mentioned, talk about things and create a space, and that's something that I was really excited to see our organization do, was to create town halls where people could really voice their concerns and their opinions about what's going on in a safe space, not be afraid to speak your mind and speak your truth about what's going on. And, one thing I always challenge like guys to do is, you can talk about it and get your feelings out, but, the guys that I work with, they have the means to actually go out and do things. And I always encourage them to do that in the community, whatever their specific passion is in the community, whether it's in the schools, whether it's police reform, whatever it is, go out and get involved with it, just because, they're a face and they have the means to do those things. So I think it's incredible that we've created now a space where these things can be talked about, these topics can be talked about. And, I'm only with our organization, but I know around the league, people did similar things and allowed their players to talk about it. And even right. Last week with the things that happened at the Capitol, right. We opened the floor, in our running back room, if anyone had anything to say or, how they felt about it. And I think it's so important to step away from sports for a second to really talk about real things, because they affect everybody.
Pops, you're part of an NBA fraternity, bro, that took a big stance. They even thought about shutting down the bubble. So talk about that. How big was that for you to just, watch your further brethren and what they were able to accomplish? And how does the message still look for you, man? Talk about it.
You know what? I think it was accentuated, obviously, because, during that time, there wasn't too many professional sports being played. The WNBA and the NBA were having their bubble, and the WNBA were just doing what they had been doing for years prior to. It just, just that everybody started taking notice to it now. And, you got to tip your hat to the WNBA for always being the thought leaders in that regard when it comes to social justice or equality or racism and anything in that regard. And so for me, it was like Maria said, it was a time for difficult conversations. It was a time for difficult conversations and empowerment. And, whenever you had a coach or a GM or any leader, and, I was a GM of the Wizards G League team at the time, and all we did was want to empower our players to speak their minds. And I also felt empowered to speak my mind also, because as if you look at us on the call, we're two or three people who are in the industry that doesn't really reflect who we are. You know what I'm saying? So I'm one of few former players and Black players in a position of leadership. You got Maria and Jennifer in male-dominated industries, and you know, we had to be audacious in our approach. We had to be audacious in our approach and everything we did to even get there. And then when it came to a point where we had to speak up for it, we had to be leaders in that regard. We had to be leaders and speak up for our truths, which was, you know, there had been these inequalities and had been these injustices that had been going on. And now it's only coming to light because somebody was murdered on, you know, we saw it on national TV or we saw it on social media. So now we have to use the platform that we have to speak to that. You know, Dr. Rivers said it best. We would love to just be basketball players or coaches or executives, but because of who we look like, what we are, our gender, our race, we have to use our platforms to speak to that. And, you know, when you know, we were empowered to do so. So when we came to that point, we just had to speak up. And again, we followed suit with the WNBA and, you know, just, you know, spoke our truths.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, we want to go ahead and take time right now to introduce Racine's finest.
Drum roll, please.
Yeah, drum roll, please. Racine's finest. This gentleman right here is a two-time All NBA All-Star championship winner as well in 2011. He's a pride of stores as a UConn Husky and All Big East Player of the Year as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Caron Butler. Thank you, Mr. Butler, for coming on for us this evening. Appreciate you.
Man, it's a pleasure and honor. Sorry for my tardiness. You know, with this COVID protocol, though, they got us moving around, not as efficiently as we would like, but most importantly, I was able to make it. So I'm extremely blessed to share this platform with all of you.
Absolutely. So we know you took care of a little ice tub. We already talked about that. We know you got a little extra practice reps in, so it's all right, Mr. Butler. We got you. But Caron, you just came in right on time. So what we're talking about is with life after playing and all the things that are taking place, and you're part of the NBA fraternity as a former player, but now as a coach. What's your thoughts on the bubble? How have you thought about conversations in the locker room, conversations around the league about looking at what's going on in our country? And how are the players handling, how they're utilizing their platforms, and what advice have you potentially given players yourself?
You know, first and foremost, you know, the climate of our country is just something like I've never seen before. But I've always had a pulse on energy. It's something that I felt, but we just never physically seen it. Like that visual never displayed itself constantly and, you know, throughout all our states and overwhelmed us throughout the country. My messaging has always been to inform and educate yourself so you can inform and educate properly on your small or large platforms. I've always been a realist. You know, my conversations has always you know, geared towards that. The reason why I got into the coaching space was, you know, not for the X and O's, but, you know, kind of the X and O's of life, but mentorship. I think that's extremely important. I think that that's something that is a huge void and it's needed, you know, with these young kings and, you know, individuals that's coming into a huge bundle of wealth. You know, and they're able to move the needle on change because let's face it, you know, you can influence, you know, so much more, you know, when you have resources or when you don't have to extend yourself to other resources because you are the primary resource because of financial independence. I think that's a huge thing. And, you know, the bubble was something that I wasn't a huge fan of initially. I spoke on it. Hosting the NBA roundtable, I talked about it because I agreed with a lot of other players. I felt like it took a lot of the attention off the real issues. Now, granted, you still was able to have the symbolic recognition of Black Lives Matter on the floor. You still was able to have, you know, group economics and all these things on the jerseys and stuff like that. And guys, you know, after post game or interviews or whatever, whenever they addressed the media, they always talked about, you know, the names, whether it's Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, so many others. They mention them, but imagine that physical presence actively in the communities. Imagine the void of not having live entertainment. I mean, hell, we saw how much energy went towards The Last Dance, and that was a social media frenzy where everybody was just talking about that, because that shit happened almost 20 some years ago, but it gave us a pulse of live entertainment again, so everybody geared to it. So I felt like if the players, men and women, would have just stayed and held their ground, more would have probably happened. But nonetheless, they put their best foot and efforts forward, and they still stood on the right side of justice, and we have seen some change.
Right.
But I just felt like more probably could have been done, and I felt like that window of opportunity has, passed, and it's gone. But however, people are still, pushing and putting their energy in the right places, and I think that the needle is still moving.
Wonderful, wonderful. We appreciate you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, you've been live with The Connect, and this presents Life After Playing. We have our illustrious panelists here with us. Right now, we're going to get into our Q&A. So I'm going to go with the first question from our DJ Parker. And DJ puts this out to the panelists tonight. It's a two-part question. He says, how important was it for you to build your network while you were still playing? Also, how has that impacted your careers now? Anybody, any panelists, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'll start, because I would just say, someone told me this, one of my OGs, he told me the roar of the crowd is not for you, it's for what you can do. And as soon as you can't do it, they'll be cheering for somebody else. And I took that to heart. And it wasn't because of, it was because of your talent and what you displayed. But when you have a platform and everybody wants to have access to you, you have to understand that you have to be thinking about your second act, and you have to try to put yourself in position while you're in it, so you'll never be out of it. And I've just always viewed the game like that. I was always thinking about my next and my next and my next, and just trying to play, the Connect game. So I think it's extremely important that, guys, highlight other strengths and other things that they're capable of doing, while they're in position. And, networking is extremely important, exploring other avenues. I mean, hell, the reason why I'm a assistant coach now is because it was something, a relationship that I created while I was active. I'm doing franchising and doing all this other stuff and producing and doing television. And then I pivot to a phone call where my man just came fresh off a finals appearance, and he was just talking to me about basketball, and I'm talking to him about what I'm seeing, what I'm observing, and all of a sudden he's like, do you want to join my coaching staff? I got a 3-year deal for you. And I was just like, oh shit, this is what I'm making over here. He like, I could double that. And then that's what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just,
absolutely,
in the midst of a pandemic, so it took a life of its own. So it's crazy. So relationships is extremely important.
Anybody else on the panel want to answer that real quick? We got plenty of questions, y'all. So if you don't want to jump in now, I got one for you that's going to be right up your lane in a second. But anybody else along the way, any networking that was important?
I think when I initially retired and was with the Players Association, one thing I really leaned on, similar to CB, was the relationships that I had built as a player. But one thing that allowed me to find purpose was giving that knowledge to the current players. When I was at the Players Association, I had a number of teams that I worked with, and whenever the players had issues or anything, they would come to me, because they would put in the job that I had, they would put former players in those positions so that current players could engage and feel like they had somebody who could lend their ear to. And I would always tell them, do what you can do right now. Like, while the ball is still bouncing, you gotta take advantage of it. My reach as a retired NBA player is nothing like what it was when I was an NBA player. When I was one of 15 guys on a roster that everybody in the arena, that's 20,000 seat arena in the Verizon Center, or it's Capital One Arena. I forget which one it is now. But there's 20,000 people in there, and they know everybody's face. And if I wanted to go up to, similar to what Magic Johnson did, go up to the CEO of Starbucks and tell him, hey, I want to do this, this, and this. You think he's going to take my call? Most definitely, because that you're in a position with that not too many people are going to be in, regardless of how much wealth they have, how successful they are. NBA players, it's a small class of people, so you have to take advantage of your notoriety as a player, and that's just for professional athletes. But networking before your respective career is done, always can help you more so when the ball does stop bouncing.
Wonderful, wonderful. Maria, this question is geared to you, and it's coming from Natalie. It says, what was the toughest part about being on the other side and not playing anymore, but making the business decisions now?
Saw that question in the chat. Nat was my point guard at VCU. So shout out, thanks for joining us. I think the toughest part for me of my job is anytime we have to cut a player, like this is their livelihood, right? This is how they provide for their family. And so I never take that lightly, but for sure, anytime we had to have those conversations where we're parting ways, with a player, is definitely the toughest.
Anyone else on that one? Being on the other side, how does that look for you now?
I agree. Cutting players was the most difficult thing. Maria and myself, we were, our offices were 2 doors down from each other, and we would go through the process, at similar times, and it would be difficult because I was cut 4 or 5 times from the NBA, and I always told myself if I ever had an opportunity to be in that position, I'd always do it with honesty, integrity, and transparency, because I had been in that position before, and I never wanted to be responsible for deterring somebody's dreams or being an obstacle in somebody's journey. And it was always difficult for me. It would continually be the most difficult part of the game for me. But if you do it the right way, at least the player can understand the reasoning and the process that went into it.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm gonna give this question to you, Karan, because I've been waiting for you, because it's well noted, man. You are one of the best guys when it comes to your life after career, from playing, man, from everything that you just really branded yourself from, your investments, the thing that you got into. And it's been known, man, like there's been documentaries and things that go on, like the documentary Broke. You got guys that go on both sides of the coin where they don't do things well with their finances while they're playing. And then they get to the end and it's like, yeah, this is going to look tough. So you talk about OGs, maybe it's somebody who got in your ear earlier. Maybe you seen the way the tide was going and where the vibe was going. But what was it for you that made you start doing some things that you knew were going to be beneficial post playing?
Well, I always looked at, I was, for those who don't know my story, I was just a natural hustler early,
right?
Like from a mental standpoint. I had the qualities. I just didn't know how to apply them, in a proper and legal way for quite some time. It took a minute to get to that point. I'm just being, so we have, complete transparency. And I had people in my corner just, trying to, steer me and usher me down the right path. And I mean, sometimes what happens is when you come upon first generation riches, people aren't thinking about wealth. People not thinking about legacy. People not thinking about generational wealth. And you have to have mentorship and guidance to teach you how to handle money properly. How to, what should you invest in early stage companies? What is a late stage investment looking like? What is, your portfolio looking like? What happens if you're no longer able to be here? How's your trust, secure, for your family not to be left with, the taxes of your estate and all those things. I had to really educate myself. I took advantage of all these programs that the NBA had. They had the Harvard Business School course. I went back and I completed that. They had the Duke Business School course. I went back and I did that. They had all this access to just like knowledge and these people where I just took advantage of that time where I shadowed people like Mark Cuban and you know, so many countless others where I just spent some time with them, even before and after, you know, I was servicing them as a basketball player and as a talent. I just wanted to know certain things so I knew how to invest properly. And I didn't feel the need to rush to spend my capital.
Right.
You know, I felt like I can leverage, you know, my celebrity in so many ways to get equity in these companies where sometimes people are going in, you know, head first, just trying to buy their way through because they have access to capital. But I leveraged my celebrity in so many different ways and so many different capacities in different areas where I had got a small percentage of equity in a lot of different companies. And I felt like a lot of guys are up on game now in doing that. But before, you know, guys really wasn't doing that. And then I just had great mentors. And I think that, you know, I serve as a mentor to a lot of people now. But, you know, when building a brand, you know, everything not going to be microwavable. You know, sometimes I had to travel, you know, across the country, been over to 20 countries just to, you know, help build my reach and my brand in order to, you know, move the needle to make the real bread. You know what I mean? So I think that you just got to have that foresight.
Got you. How about for anybody else on the panel? Was there somebody who got to you early and helped you, like, you know, start to put things in place post playing or get to you where you were at? Maybe even it's a book, maybe some advice via a book. Cool. Let me go back to another question that I found right here because it has to do with Upstart. So Andro has a question saying, where do a student start to find internships or jobs in the field? Where should they go potentially?
I can answer that one since, you know, I've been through that position before.
Please do.
There's a bunch of ways you can find it. One of the main popular ones is Teamwork Online to find those internships and those entry-level positions. That's a good one. LinkedIn's becoming more and more popular with job postings in the sports industry. So I would definitely hit those two places up first to see where people are hiring on that side, especially in the sports industry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danny. Let me go to this side right here. Malcolm has a great question, and any one of you guys can answer this one. How do you have that work-life balance? Given the fact that some of you guys were always traveling or always moving around with teams, and now you may not be as much anymore, but once again, how do you find that work-life balance? Because there's a lot of pressures in the professions that you're in.
TJ, I would like to just talk about those internships real quick before we move on to this. That's something I noticed before I moved into football. I was a head college basketball coach, and you know, I constantly got emails. I constantly got, you know, people wanting an opportunity to coach or to play. And it's so important for you guys as you know, start to network, to know how to communicate with people, how to write, how to put together a proper email, how to put together a proper sentence. Because it was so many times I would get emails and, you know, my name, which is easy, would be misspelled or things would be wrong. And it's just, you know, it's kind of annoying to get sometimes because you're already getting a lot of things and I want to look through them to try to help people. But to me, that's attention to detail. You know, did you read it? Did you have someone else look over it before you send it? So just make sure, you know, your communication skills are tight, your writing skills are tight before you start reaching out to people about the internships and things, because that's something that can definitely give you, you know, a leg up. And, you know, I guess I'll answer the question since I'm already talking, but, you know, a work-life balance in season, you know, it doesn't really exist, just to be real with you. You know, in the NFL, we work extremely long days and so does everyone else. You know, I would get in the office super early and leave super late. So it wasn't really a balance with that. Now that we're in the off season, there is more of a balance. But, you know, sometimes you just got to grind it out. You don't have time to have any type of, you know, work life and family life at the same time. You know, sometimes people can balance that out, but for me in the position that I'm currently in, for me, it's all about grinding. So if something has a sacrifice, it's going to be that outside of work things for me right now. So I'm okay not having that balance. And, you know, as I mentioned, now in the off season, things will get kind of back to normal, but, you know, I'm just trying to stay in grind mode.
Wonderful. Work-life balance, guys. Anybody else, please jump on.
Can you guys hear my daughter? Because she's like screaming right now that I'm not giving her a bath. I don't know if you can hear her. But, you know, like I picked her up early from school today because I knew I was going to have this, you know, this evening. So, I mean, to echo, Jennifer, in season, it doesn't exist. As it's as sad as that might be. So I just really try to take advantage of the off season.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think what Maria and Jennifer said is it's difficult in season, even off season. And with the NBA, it's 365 days a year. If it's not in season, then it's pre-draft workouts, and then after the draft, it's summer league. After the summer league, you might have a small window where it's kind of quiet, and all of a sudden everybody's coming back into town, and you're starting up again. So there's no real time when there's anywhere of a balance. So it's time management, and it's a sacrifice. It's it's those who is willing to sacrifice for the greater good or what they're trying to accomplish. And it's difficult at times when you have small children and kids, which I had. I used to travel 50 miles, to and from work to just be a father. And it was what was necessary to do so, because I wanted to make sure I invested my time into my job as well as being a parent too. And so it was a commitment. What are you committed to? I was committed to my family, and I was committed to my job, and that kind of limited anything else that I wanted to what I wanted to accomplish, or wanted to be a part of, because those were the two priorities in my life: work and family.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Quick question that's in the chat for both Pops and Karan. When you made it, as they say, how did you handle the fame, the money, the attention, and criticism? And did your family members start acting different? That's a real life question right there.
Yeah.
Who want to go first?
CB, you got that one. CB, you got that one. I'm gonna follow you.
Yeah, I think that people have to understand that. I forget, I was watching a visual or a podcast, and somebody was talking about, when you look at the rooms, prior to COVID, all this stuff existed. When someone get drafted, when you cry, pretty much everybody at the table start crying too, because they get the sense of they all made it, and they do make it in some capacity, but financially they just feel like whatever you have access to, they have access to. And, I've just always been someone that's been straightforward. I tell people what it is and what it ain't. And a lot of relationships have been fractured because of, me being completely honest. Someone telling me, hey, when I want the new Cadillac, or I want anything, whatever, this is my early stages. I'll be like, I'm not doing that. It's not happening, and now that's a fractured relationship. But going forward, I'm so happy because I see so many other cases, in the locker rooms, and, people I play with, and now even people that I coach, that because they never said no early, or because they never drew a line in the sand early, now this person is a dependent, and they're responsible for these individuals. And it's going to be tough to tell them someday that I can't do that no longer. And that's when it's going to get real ugly. So I've just always been straightforward to that point. I forget what the other question was, but I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people have to deal with, because, it's hard. People, your family support you, your family there for you, and it's certain things you can do monetarily, but you're not responsible for anyone besides your immediate family and your children. And I think that that's how a lot of people do find themselves in financial bad situations.
All right, so Karan ain't talk about the amount of new cousins that he had, but maybe Pops, you will. Like, let's be honest with that. What's happening?
No, I mean, I respect what Karan said, because I didn't have that. I didn't have the gumption or the ability to say no early on. I was, I'm from my heritage is Ghanaian in West Africa. And, whenever I was the second youngest of 5 in my family, and when I came to the NBA, I automatically became a leader. I automatically became a leader in my family because of my, where I was financially. And I just took on that responsibility. And, I helped send my younger brother to college and did all these other things for my family, because I just thought that's just what was supposed to happen. I just stepped into that role. I thought, now you got to step up as a leader and help out your parents, or help out, in things that, they may not have been able to have access to prior to. And, it was difficult. And it wasn't until, I needed help. It may not have been financially, but when I needed help emotionally or mentally, that's when I realized I needed to start, looking after number one first. Because people often say, you change when you get money. But one thing I've noticed is when you come into money, everybody else around you changes. You are who you are before you came into wealth. And when that happened, I just noticed everybody else was living or acting like they had gotten there. And yes, if that's your immediate family, you can understand that to an extent, but still they can't, that sense of entitlement can't come in there. Luckily, I came from a grounded background, and we were able to stay that way throughout the process. And I wasn't hit like some other stories similar to what Karan said, that there's the horror stories of teammates and other players going broke and losing their money early on, and struggling to get by, and they had made all this kind of money. I learned early on how to start to I learned from my mistakes early on and how to say no after that point onwards. So it was the lesson that I had to go through before I ended up being able to adhere some of those qualities that Karan possessed.
Wonderful. Let's do one more question, and Danny, I'll kick it over to you. So Jovan asked, for many of y'all deal with players and are once or players yourselves. If you want to be a sports agent or work behind the scenes in sports, but you don't want to go to college, what is the route? Any suggestions? Karan started with the laugh first.
No, I wasn't say something real fun. I'm gonna leave it alone. I was to say connect with Rich Paul, man. Like,
yeah,
I really do feel like getting under the wing of someone that have access to just the relationships. I've seen people that take for instance Rich Paul. He had a remarkable relationship with Lynn Merritt and those guys at Nike. LeBron's friend, his brother, someone that he trusted. And, initially when he started representing LeBron, I don't know a lot of people know this, but he didn't even have a license to do so. You know what I mean? Yeah. So just like being able to navigate through that space on the strength of relationships and having your partner say, I trust you. I know you have my best interest. I know you're trying to build what we trying to build. And look what happened. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people can, learn a lot from, the way they went about it. Now, everybody's not going to have the face of the NBA at your fingertips, but, it is a lot of things that you can take away from the way he navigated through that space.
Yeah,
I was going to say that, Karan. Like you made it sound real simple. And forgot that dude had LeBron James in his back pocket. That when you're representing the best player on the planet, it makes things a lot easier. But to Karan's point, looking at somebody like that and how they were able to navigate, and he still had to learn the game regardless. He still had to learn that side of the game regardless of if he had LeBron in his corner or not. He still had to acquire that knowledge and that learn that side of the game. So definitely hats off to somebody like Rich Paul.
2017 or 2018, Sports Illustrated did a great piece on him, and he spilled a lot of jewels. So for Jovan, you want to know that information about taking that route on Rich Paul, go Google, look up that article. It's a great way to get some research on that. Go ahead, Danny, what you got up for us?
Yeah, definitely. We had someone email over a question to us, so feel free to answer anyone on the panel here. But the question is, I'm trying to navigate what exactly I want to do in sports. How am I supposed to do that with no previous work experience going into any field? The biggest hurdle I'm facing right now, because I clearly have been a professional athlete as my career the whole time. I always hear people say to what you do before into a conversation with someone, that's hard to understand when I haven't been able to try things out yet. So I think, Maria, that might be a good question for you to answer, especially coming the background that you have, for sure.
So the question is, they're a pro athlete and they're trying to transition to career.
Transition to a career in the sports field, but they're not exactly where to start. Is it ticket sales? Is it marketing, which department, they don't have a good feel for that department yet.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would like, first of all, spend a bunch of time like just setting up informational interviews, because like number one, you're getting to learn about that individual's role and responsibilities, you know, within their team, within their department. And number two, you're kind of figuring out, you know, which way you're leaning in terms of like which department you may want to work for: ticket sales, sponsorship, be on the team side, marketing, social media, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So just, I would undertake like just an exploration project. People will be willing to talk to you more so than you think you may know. And then, you know, to Pop's point earlier, like you'll probably never have as many connections as you have, you know, as a player or as an athlete. Like if you call and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I play for XYZ, people are going to pick up the phone just because of who you are. So don't let that time pass before like your playing days are over and you're like, oh crap. Because then when you call and you say like, hey, I used to play, people don't care anymore, honestly. And so take advantage of, you know, the name that you have and the recognition that you have now.
Anybody else on that one real quick?
I think Maria, she nailed it. Whenever you put the X in front of anything, ex-player, ex-husband, ex-wife, hey, it has got a different taste to it. You know what I mean? Like the window closed quick. I'm just saying, man, I'm keeping it 1,000 right now. It's different.
Oh man, well, I appreciate you, Karan, because you came in timely today. You definitely brought the humor with you from practice, so we appreciate you, bro. We're gonna go to another one in the Q&A that's important. I think I'm gonna go to this one from Ms. Valerie. Ms. Valerie asked, how difficult was it for you to transition from being the pro athlete to going in the corporate profession into your position?
I was never a athlete, so I'll let y'all handle that.
No, but Maria,
think,
you bring something. Hold on one second. You bring sideline coaching experience, and then you went to the corporate side. So that's also something that you can speak on if you choose to. Go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
For me, it was being trained to do something in a certain way for so long. You know, I had been a professional athlete for over a decade, and then it's weird because you go from, you know, playing a sport to having to write these emails to even the first time I had written a sentence since college, and it sounds crazy, was when I retired. And the only thing I had ever written was my autograph. And then, you know, with new age, with social media and everything that's going on, I was always typing something. First time I had written the whole sentence, even when I took notes or even when I journaled, I used to journal, I did it in my phone. And so when it came down to me actually writing again, I had to retrain myself and, tap back into some of those things that I learned in college and use that degree that I had acquired. So it was really difficult at first, but then when I started to realize all the things and the transferable skills, like I alluded to before, I understood that I had leadership qualities. I knew how to be accountable. I had professionalism. I knew how to always be on time, and I just knew I had these qualities in me that not a lot of professional athletes know they possess when it comes to being on the corporate side. So once I realized I possessed them, it was just tapping into them and honing them at this point that really helped me on this side of the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what you said as well.
Go ahead.
Just, I think that a lot of people sometimes just see you as that, like whatever it is, like whether it's, you know, WNBA, NBA, whatever profession, whatever you did, just that. And they feel like, you know, sometimes you have to go outside that space to like reprove yourself or introduce those skills that you possess. You know, I think that, you know, sports have an amazing parallel with life. You know, you learn how to be the first man on the bench, the star. You learn how to operate in the first five, and then you also learn how to be a part of the supporting cast, you know, if you get the luxury of playing later in your career. You know, so you find a way to be an asset to, you know, the organization. You find a way to be an asset to whatever you build. And, so I think that was like the biggest thing for me. People just identified me as, the basketball player. They didn't know that I had, thoughts. They didn't know that I can elaborate on topics and things. And, I don't know, it's intriguing to watch people just like eyes, like, get, bigger and bigger as you, show them that you just more than whatever they identified you as. But that is a hurdle. That is a hurdle to get over and get past.
Even that media award-winning side too, huh, Karan?
Yeah, it's that's tough too, because I think that Pops touched on being prompt, being on time, being able to articulate your ideas, being part of email chains, giving providing color, telling stories. Right. I've always been a huge fan of hip hop and some of the best storytellers. They used to talk about hip hop and the way they could put a 16 together. And that's pretty much, television. When you're in that space, you have to be able to provide, great commentary and provide, like, if I could close my eyes, you're telling me the visual of what I should be seeing and educating me and teaching me in real time. And I think that's so important to be able to do that.
Amazing. Listen, I want to thank Jennifer, Maria, Pops, and Karan as well. You guys have been an amazing group of panelists. But before we conclude tonight, there's just one final question, and we want you all to dig into this one really quickly. Listen, throughout your careers, especially when you guys were athletes and playing on a stellar and immaculate level, you put a lot of time in preparation, training, eating right, weightlifting, putting up shots, whatever the case was, and then you moved over to the other side. What were two weaknesses that you had to work on to be great on the corporate side or the coaching side? Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and start. I think one of my biggest weaknesses has always been patience. Like I get impatient with things, and sometimes, you gotta fall in love with the process of things. And, my impatience sometimes almost cost me opportunities. But I really had to check myself as far as being patient and believing that what I'm doing is the right thing, and those opportunities will come. So for me, that was the biggest thing that I had to deal with, just being patient. And the second thing was more about other people, but obviously being a woman in football, just getting past that initial hurdle of that credibility. And luckily, I've been fortunate enough to work for great coaches and have a great group of guys that I've worked with everywhere I've been. So they help with that, but I still get some of those comments. And ultimately, I don't listen to people outside of where I work, because they don't matter to me. Just because if I'm doing a good job and the people that matter, say I'm doing a good job, that's all that matters. So I don't really get caught up in the other things, but it's important to make sure everything that you do is the right way, and that patience that you have sometimes to fall in love with the process, and believe in the journey is super important.
Ladies first. Maria, you up next. Two weaknesses that you had to work on.
Yeah, I had to, first and foremost, like, just by nature, I'm a people pleaser. And so as I've kind of aged in my career, I've had to work on that. And you're not going to make everybody happy all the time. And you just got to, put your head down and do a good job and do what is the right thing to do. And then second of all, reflecting back on playing college basketball and then transitioning, to my career. I was kind of surprised, because as a player, I was always kind of very like vocal and had no problem, speaking up. But I found myself in my career, I had a hard time kind of finding my voice and like really having confidence about what I was doing, early on. And so for me, that was a weakness coming into my career that I really had to work on, is finding my voice and being confident. And I did that really by just being super prepared all the time. And honestly, like to this day, sometimes I still practice like what I'm gonna say, or like the pitch I'm gonna make, like, when talking about a player or the direction of our team. And so those are kind of like little tricks that like help me out, and still, to this day, finding my voice and being confident about speaking up.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Pops, I'm gonna shoot it to you next. Two weaknesses you had to work on the executive side, man.
One was understanding that the journey is better than the destination, similar to what Jennifer said. And the other one was responding to emails. Just had to get used to, you know, when I became a GM, you know, I went from a scout who wasn't really front facing of the organization, and I could just, you know, worry about if my GM was going to send me an email, and, you know, I was fine. But then when I became, you know, the focal point, or not even the focal point, a leader of an organization, I had to respond to my managers, my coaches, agents, and then, you know, my superiors. And, you know, that's 30, 40 emails a day. And that was tough to get used to. So that was just, you know, operational side of things. But really and truly understanding that the journey is better than the destination. One of the first things I learned as a scout, I remember speaking to a GM at the time, and I asked him, you know, he saw that I was scouting and I was on the circuit, and I asked him, what's one thing that I should know as a new scout? And he said, you know, appreciating the journey and the process that you're going through, because, you know, it's a grind. Just like thinking about, you know, you work your whole life to get to the NBA, and you finally get there, and, you know, your career starts and you don't get to soak it up. So if you're able to appreciate the hard work that you've put in, the sacrifices that you made, some of the things that you've had to go through, the obstacles that have come in your way, and appreciating those things, it allows you to soak up that destination all the more. When I became a general manager, I knew it wasn't the end all be all, but it allowed me to appreciate everything that I had been through and understand that my career ended early and this was my purpose now. And so it allowed me to appreciate that all the more. So just understanding that the journey is better than the destination, and just learning how to respond to emails. That was the biggest thing for me.
Got you. Ron, before you go, I'm gonna kind of remake yours a little bit, bro. So what was one thing that you had to work on from the analyst hat, because you had the analyst hat, and then what's one of the things that you've seen that you have to work on right now in your coaching area right now?
And I'm glad you asked that. Just being, you know, I've always prided myself on this being raw and uncut.
Right.
I think that as, you know, as an analyst, you have to be, you know, this conscious to like what players' feelings are and all that stuff. So you try to serve as an educator and provider of information in that capacity. And now as a coach, you know, you have guys, you know, I'm a father of 5, 4 girls, 1 son. I have a 21-year-old son, and I have, you know, 3 20-year-olds on my team. You know, so I have to be a provider of, you know, guidance and usher them down the path, but I can't be too critical. You know, I kind of have to lead them down that way. And, you know, that was an adjustment for me. You know, like if there's a loose ball right there, it's like, damn, the ball was right there. I would have got it. Shit, you know, but it's like you gotta kind of say, you know, who should have got to that ball? You know, why was that ball important to get? That, you know, the possessions matter and all, you know, like right. You gotta like kind of break it down and give them that message in a different way. And that's been an adjustment for me because I've just always been like that with it, you know, right. But you know, I'm learning, and it is a process, and I'm thankful that I have guys that's not, you know, too emotional, you know, and they're with me, they ride with me, so it's a good position.
Wonderful. Well, to Ms. Jennifer King, Maria Giovanetti, Pop Spencer Bonzu, and Mr. Karan Butler, we want to thank you guys for being an illustrious panel, talking about your life and experiences after your playing days. We wish you all the best. And I'm going to turn it back over into our capable hands of our great CEO and co-founder of The Connect, Ms. Danielle White.
Thank you guys. Thank you, TJ, for moderating tonight. Definitely great. I'm going to find a salary, put you on resume to introduce me to everyone everywhere I go around. So definitely great introductions there. But once again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees for tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up on our social channels or our email address. But definitely be on the lookout for more events like this. They'll be coming your way. Thank you guys and have a good night.
Blessings.
Thank you.